Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We have got Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin from Michigan joining us. It is her first term as a senator after spending 6 years in the House. Slotkin's also a former CIA intelligence analyst. She served 3 tours in Iraq, and she serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee. That's important background because, of course, we are in the middle of the war with Iran. Tens of billions of dollars have been spent so far. And NBC News is reporting that President Trump has approved the deployment of more than 1,000 paratroopers to the Middle East. All of this is raising questions about congressional oversight and the use of artificial intelligence in war. Just last week, Slotkin put forth a proposal to legislate how the Pentagon can actually use AI. So I want to ask her about that and about the gridlock in Congress over funding for the Department of Homeland Security and how close they are to a deal. So with that, I want to bring in Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin. Hi, Senator Slotkin.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Let's start with news of the day, and that is the war with Iran. You are deeply familiar with the Middle East. You served 3 tours in Iraq as a CIA analyst. Based on what you know about the region, about Iran's current regime and where we are in this war, do you think it was the right move?
Certainly, we tend to be able to rack and stack whether, things have been successful or not after a war is complete, and we are fully in the middle of this one. But I would just say it is really hard to know whether you've, quote, won or achieved your objectives if you can't even be clear about what your objectives were for going in. So the scale to even grade how we're doing is off because the president and his cabinet could not get their talking points clear on what the goals of this war were. But at a very minimum, I take the goals that they sent to Congress, right? They notified Congress in a war powers resolution and they or notification, and they said, we want to something about mitigate Iran's power projection in the region. And by any measure, with Iran having a complete veto on who can and cannot cross the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf, by the complete choking off of all commercial traffic, military traffic, any kind of traffic. You cannot say that we have done anything but actually enabled their power projection, particularly in the Persian Gulf. I know that we have hurt their nuclear capabilities, their ballistic missile capabilities. That is not, to me, a question. But if we can't move, a ship full of fertilizer through the Strait of Hormuz, then Iran holds a veto power over the United States and everybody else. And until and unless that is resolved, there's no possible way you can say that we're in a good place in this war.
So what I'm hearing you say is you don't feel as if the president and his team have gone about this war in the right way.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think from being unclear about objectives, from literally confusing the American public about what was truly imminent versus not imminent. I mean, that word is important. Was there an imminent threat from the nuclear capabilities of Iran? I have not seen evidence of that. And so whether it's the objectives going in and the confused objectives, the skewing of information about actual threats to American citizens, their communication problems. And then, frankly, right now, we're about to deal in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure, with the price tag for this war. And, they're floating $200 billion, which, just for perspective, at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, like when we have hundreds of thousands of troops and personnel and pieces of equipment in those 2 countries, the largest supplemental request that we ever received here on Capitol Hill or was ever sent to Capitol Hill was $90 billion. At the height of those 2 wars, and they're asking for $200 billion today. So it is again, I as someone who was at the Pentagon and at the CIA, I think it's important that we, as much as possible, remain objective about national security things. But as of this moment, I don't think you can say we've won at this point.
You mentioned this $200 billion supplemental funding that the president's going to be asking for. He did not come to Congress to get approval to launch this war in the first place, but he's going to come to you and the rest of the members of Congress in order to get this funding. How are you going to vote on it?
Well, look, I always say, as a commitment, as a senator who's a Democrat who represents a state that voted for Trump twice, like I read what is sent to me. I wait to see it in black and white, and I try to assess it as independently as I can. So I will always, like, they haven't produced anything. I've just seen things tweeted and floated in press. So I will look at everything that comes across my desk and try to be objective. But I am skeptical after them getting an extra $150 billion back in July on top of a nearly $1 trillion defense budget from last year. I'm skeptical that they've looked through the couch cushions and aren't just inflating in a serious way what they need. So it would be hard to imagine me getting to a place of voting yes. But on national security, I'm just not going to make a decision without seeing the black and white documents.
Listen, you said to us just now, right, you don't agree with how the president got into this thing, but you told Politico we are in it now, right? 4 weeks into this war, not necessarily seeing an off-ramp, the president asking likely for all of this money for you and fellow lawmakers to approve of. So then what is, from your perspective and the Democratic perspective, the exit ramp here as we are nearly a month into this thing?
Well, look, I mean, wars end in predictable ways. Wars either end when one side is completely beaten and gives up. Wars end when both sides, after a prolonged period, are so exhausted they kind of both give up at the same time. And then the third way is negotiation, right? You negotiate a deal. That's how wars end. And I think what you're seeing now is the president sort of putting two options on the table. He's bringing more force into theater. He's bringing Marines. He's bringing the 82nd Airborne. He's moving a ton of stuff from Europe into the Middle East. He is continuing, I think, with that force first kind of thought. At least it appears. And then on the second score, he's, open to negotiation. We're seeing that now, right? There's all these things being floated, a 15-point plan, or J.D. Vance is going to fly and negotiate. You're seeing all that come out, and that's them kind of airing.
But Iranians aren't even necessarily trusting the negotiating process. Twice they have sat down with both Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, and twice during negotiations, the United States has launched on Iran, right? So can we even trust that negotiations are actually ongoing in spite of hearing the president say, we are negotiating?
Well, and even if they're ongoing, are they going to get anywhere if one party just doesn't believe that the other party's negotiating in good faith? So there's a huge number of questions around whether you can successfully negotiate a diplomatic solution now to end this war. But clearly the president is looking. I mean, look, he's a politician, and he is seeing the same things I'm seeing in a place like Michigan. The last thing I saw when I left Michigan on Monday was like a 90-minute line, or it was over the weekend, a 90-minute line at Costco to get gas. Not because there's a gas shortage, but because it's cheaper at Costco, and people are willing to wait that long to get cheaper gas. $4 a gallon in Michigan is like, it is really, really impacts the average person in a real serious way. He's feeling that economic heat. He's seeing the forecast saying that even if we cleaned up this war tomorrow and the Strait of Hormuz opened, oil markets wouldn't get back to pre-war levels until 2027 at the earliest. I mean, this is important disruption that is happening here and is not going to be playing well with people's pocketbooks. He knows that, and I think he's now looking for options. Whether those options will work remains to be seen, because if as you say, if you sort of use what we call the madman theory in national security, which is never be predictable. Your adversary never knows what you're going to do. They never know what you're going to do next. If you're practicing that, it makes it really hard when you actually want to negotiate and you want someone to believe you. So we're seeing that bear out now. But, the American public, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, we're not looking to get into another prolonged war that affects their pocketbooks.
I want to talk about the information or the lack thereof that both the American public are getting along with lawmakers in Congress. In those first wave of attacks, there was an attack on a school, killing 175 people, mostly children, by the way. You, at the time, and a dozen other senators or so, signed a letter to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth asking for more information about that particular school bombing, including a demand to know whether AI was actually used in any way to assess the target. We have sources here at NBC News that have told us that the Pentagon is looking into whether the strikes were a result of, quote unquote, outdated intelligence. Is it your thinking? Is it your assumption that AI was a part of that, quote unquote, outdated intelligence that the Pentagon was using in that strike that killed all those kids in Iran?
It is not part of my assumption. I think that's a possibility, but so is human error. So is, I mean, look, people of a certain age, certainly my age and older, remember when the United States of America accidentally bombed the Chinese embassy in Serbia during the Balkan War. That was old maps, human error. And so it's human beings make mistakes in war too. I have no special information on the role of AI in that strike. But
we know AI is being used in this war now by the Department of Defense and by the Pentagon.
I think AI is being used in different ways. This is why we just put legislation on the table and sponsored some of the first legislation. But I just want to be frank that this is a significant error, right? I mean, in Iraq and Afghanistan, the numbers of civilian citizens, children that were killed means we have an obligation to independently and objectively assess what happened. And the Pentagon says that they are doing that. We need to provide oversight to make sure they actually do it. But I don't have special knowledge that AI in this case was used in any way, and I just want to be clear about that.
So, if it wasn't the school, then what was your impetus to introduce the AI Guardrails Act that you talked about, the legislation?
We had been working on this legislation in general, and then we had kind of bust into the open this debate between some of the AI companies and Pete Hegseth on the rules of the road for AI being used at the Pentagon. And that conversation, I think, really exposed what a number of us had been thinking about privately, which is, what is the right role? You know, I think the American public is just starting to understand what AI can do in general in their lives. And we're moving full-throated ahead on integrating that across our Fortune 500 companies, but also at the Pentagon. And it shouldn't be up to either a private company or anyone's SecDef, anyone's Secretary of Defense, to define the left and right limits. It's congressional responsibility. That's the job of the legislature, is to put left and right limits on new things. And I think that's a failure of this body that I'm sitting in. And so for the upcoming legislative season on the Pentagon budget, we propose this legislation. It's very simple, but it puts some left and right limits on the use of AI and making sure, in particular, I think most importantly, that there's human engagement and involvement in decisions on life and death.
So let's talk about some of the points that are in this bill. First and foremost, as you mentioned, right, humans should be in the loop when launching lethal strikes. Machines shouldn't be making the call, essentially. Defense Department should not be allowed to use AI to conduct mass surveillance in the U.S., and AI should not be able to launch or detonate nuclear weapons. The first 2 points already exist, it seems, as DoD guidelines, right? It's not law, but guidelines nonetheless. These are also the points that actually led to the partnership between the DoD and the AI company Anthropic falling apart, right? Basically, Anthropic wanting to ensure that the DoD was following these points. They didn't want it to be just guidelines, as I said, that the DoD already has in place. What are you hoping this bill could feasibly accomplish? And why did you decide to do it alone and not wait for co-sponsors?
Yeah. So what I'm hoping it will do is be a big topic of conversation in this spring's Pentagon budget conversation, the NDAA, the way that we legislate around military issues. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I've flagged far and wide in my committee that I think this is an important thing for this committee on a bipartisan basis to engage on. My goal would be to codify those rules of the road and not leave it up, again, to like just policy of any one department or agency or any one company. The reason why we ended up doing it by ourselves, first of all, we searched for a Republican co-sponsor. Whenever I can, especially on issues of national security, I would like things to be bipartisan. That's how we get things actually done faster. But we approached a number of offices. We approached one office who was pretty blunt, and they said, look, we don't have a problem with the substance. We just don't want the political problem of having to put our name on this bill and be seen as trying to push back on the Pentagon or Pete Hegseth or the president. So I think, you hope for the best and work for that. But if not, we still got to move. We still have to discuss this as a country. What is the role of human beings in decisions on life and death? And I'm hoping that if we have a fair and open debate, we should have hearings on this, not just on the legislation, on the whole category, the whole concept. That's what we do when new technology, game-changing technology that, frankly, we need to be thinking about, because we are in a serious competition with China on AI in our military. And there's people in my own party who are saying, let's just have a full moratorium on all AI or on all this stuff. And it's like, well, China's not going to do that, right? So we have to deal with the problems that are on our plate right now and deal with them as a democracy, not as an authoritarian country, as a country that tries to parse through these issues in a fair and reasonable way. That's what we're trying to do. Difficult in today's environment, but that's what we are attempting to do with this bill.
Okay. Last question. We have a partial government shutdown right now. We're going on possibly 6 weeks, right, of TSA employees not getting paid. You got lines wrapping around airports around the country. Colleagues at NBC reporting Republicans believe they have a solution. The path is going to be involving funding DHS without immigration enforcement and deportation operations under ICE. And by the way, we are also getting reports, though, that Republicans say, okay, we're going to pass what we've agreed upon with the Democrats, but we're going to use reconciliation to fund the rest of ICE and then pass parts of the Save America Act, because that's what the president is most focused on. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah. So we thought we had a deal. We thought we were within like 12 or 24 hours of a deal where we fund everything but ICE, since we're having an American conversation about the use of force in our cities. That is now like a cultural conversation in America after what happened in Minneapolis. So carve that out, fund FEMA and the Coast Guard and all the other important missions at DHS. We thought we were there. And then the president came out and said, nope, I don't like the deal that's on the table. I don't like anything that the Republicans and the Senate are trying to do. It's very hard to negotiate a deal with Senate Republicans when they keep getting undercut by the president. We're a border state in Michigan. I was just literally coming from a meeting with one of our TSA officers who was in town trying to lobby Congress to do something about this. And so I'm ready to fund that. I'm ready to stay and fund that if we need to, whatever. But I think this is just kind of a game playing thing. And my Republican colleagues are trying to shield ICE when they know that Democrats, Republicans, and independents don't agree with what they saw with their own eyes in Minneapolis. So we're ready to deal.
Senator Slotkin, thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
That's going to do it for us. Here's the scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.